Everybody, I'm Gwen Campbell-Mindes. Welcome to Mom's Favorites, Books My Mother Loved, a memorial that I began upon the passing of my mother, now, good Lord, 3 years ago. So, I have been delaying a little because between one thing and another, I hadn't quite got round to finishing the most recent, second, last, penultimate, I don't know, however you want to say it, book in the Palliser Novels, The Prime Minister, by Anthony Trollope. So, in this book, we have two major plot threads going on. The first plot thread is about a young woman, and this young woman has fallen in love with a man who we can see, based on how he is described at the beginning of the book, is going to turn out to be a bad thing. So we have her story, and then the other primary story in the course of this is the story of the titular Pallisers, which is, of course, rather surprising to me, given that the Pallisers have been through most of this series secondary characters, but in this one they are genuinely and definitively central to this book. And what happens is that the Prime Minister, the government of the moment, winds up basically falling apart. Neither the left nor the right, neither the Whigs nor the Tories, liberals or conservatives, however you want to think of it, none of them can manage to actually hold a government together, and so they decide to create a coalition government, and Plantagenet Palliser, who has since the death of his uncle become the Duke of Omnium, basically gets called upon to be the Prime Minister. Now, for any Americans or people who are not dealing in parliamentary systems like this, what you have to understand is that in systems that are different from the United States, is in the United States, you have an election for your president. That is, everybody who is legally allowed to vote can go and say, this is the person that I want to be in charge of my country for the next 4 years. In a parliamentary system like in the UK or in Canada, what you have is whatever party wins the majority of the seats in Parliament, in the House, their party leader then becomes Prime Minister. Basically, whoever it is that has the majority then also gets to be in charge of the government. See, in a system like the United States, you could have every single member of the House be Republican, but still vote in a Democratic president. It's unlikely, of course. I mean, it's very, very unlikely, but it's a thing that can happen. Whereas in a parliamentary system, whoever is in majority in Parliament also is the leader. And so, to an extent, by voting for your regional representative, you are also thus voting for whoever is going to run your country, which is why there are a lot of people who tend to wind up just looking at who's going to become Prime Minister if they vote, Liberal or Tory or whatever, and say, well, if this is the person that I want to be prime minister, then I'm going to vote this way regionally, because you cannot vote separately for whoever's in charge unless you are a party member and involved in voting for the party leader. Because this is going to be a coalition, there's sort of some back and forth, and they decide on Plantagenet Palliser. And Plantagenet, it turns out, doesn't think he's up to it. More than that, it's not merely that he doesn't think he's up to it, he thinks that he is the worst possible choice. He winds up doing it because a whole bunch of people pressure him into it, but this is a man who genuinely doesn't want power, and in point of fact, because he is now a peer of the realm, he's now a duke, he actually cannot take part in the regular day-to-day sort of governance, the rough and tumble of politicking in Parliament. That he's in the House of Lords, but the House of Lords is kind of like the Senate. It's not the same thing. You don't put bills forward, you kind of just discuss whether or not a bill should take place and then, sign off on it or not, but you're not doing the House of Representatives job, which is what Plantagenet Palliser really, really loved. And upon becoming prime minister, he felt like he didn't have the chops for it. And interestingly enough, you see this of what he did sitting alone in his chamber. She knew less and less from day to day. His wife, Glencora, she is sort of launches herself into this. She thinks that it is awesome that he is prime minister, and she sets herself to basically trying to do all of the schmoozing that people do in politics in order to prop up her husband's position in government, his coalition government, and so on and so forth. Part of the problem with this, though, is the problem that has plagued their relationship right from the start. Their marriage is, in a lot of ways, muchly an arranged marriage. Back in the first book, she got bullied into it by her family, who didn't want her to marry that ne'er-do-well. And while she probably wouldn't have done so well with that ne'er-do-well, she and Plantagenet Palliser never understood each other, because she is a highly social creature. She is a very not flighty. I wouldn't particularly like to say that. There's an aspect whereby she is that, but what she really is more not even idiosyncratic. There is an actual word that I'm thinking of that I can't remember right now, but since I don't actually, edit these or anything, you're all just going to have to live with the mystery of what it is that I'm thinking of. But the point is that Lady Glencora, Duchess of Omnium, Her Grace, really, really, has a point of view on things and how she sees the world, and she is very, very active and in some ways idiosyncratic, and it's a viewpoint that matches very, very poorly with her husband, who is reticent, who is pragmatic and calm, and basically, I feel like they are exceedingly ill-matched, but, once they're married, they're kind of stuck. And so, as this book goes on, she tries and tries and tries to prop up his government from the outside in the way that she can, by giving dinners, by hosting people at their home, the historical home of the Pallisers, of the Dukes of Omnium, which neither of them like, but she nonetheless arranges to go there because she feels a need to try to, create this impression that he is a good and gracious host, and he basically just ruins it. He avoids talking to people. He will only talk to his few political cronies that he actually likes, and he only wants to sit there and read his books about politics and things of that nature, and basically all of her efforts get ruined by him, but then all of these things that he's trying to do keep getting ruined by her. They are just so poorly matched as a couple. It's kind of awful to watch. The other thing that we get in this is Emily Wharton, who falls in love with a Ferdinand Lopez, and Ferdinand Lopez is much maligned early in the books, in such ways that we can basically assume right from the start that he's going to turn out bad, mostly because everybody keeps accusing him of being a Portuguese Jew. I don't think, probably Portuguese in background, Jewish less likely, but either way, once you start accusing somebody of being a Jew in a 19th century novel, you might as well just give up, because clearly this is going to be a bad person. The thing was, I spent a huge portion of this book desperately hoping that I was going to be wrong, not so much because I care about the anti-Semitism or what have you, but more because I hate reading books in which you watch people make a parade of terrible decisions, and this was a book filled with people making a parade of terrible decisions, which is very wearing. Anyways, Emily Wharton falls in love with Ferdinand Lopez, and she goes against everybody and gets married to him, and he turns out to be somebody who is conniving and wants her father to pay for all the things, and everything goes really, really badly and goes worse and worse and worse, and in the meantime she realizes that she was in fact in love with Arthur, whatever his surname is, I don't remember offhand, but she winds up, realizing that she was in love with him, but it was too late, and she's already married, and so things continue on until things get really, really bad for Lopez and for the Prime Minister, and the Prime Minister winds up having to resign after a particular bill that they had sort of been hinging their coalition government on fell through, and Lopez winds up killing himself, which is a really weird thing in that I felt that it was overly convenient. I mean, it's never convenient to have somebody commit suicide by stepping in front of a train, but it felt a little bit too much like Trollope was just trying to find a way to ensure that Emily wound up, being set to be happily married to Arthur, in spite of the fact that, like, this, it felt a little bit too much like a Deus Ex Machina. Anyways, so Ferdinand Lopez dies, and she decides that she has been so ashamed of her behavior of going against her father's will and choosing to marry somebody who, I would like to point out that at that point in the book she did not believe herself to be in love with Arthur, and in fact was excessively certain that she loved Arthur as a dear friend and possibly a brother, but not, romantically, which was why she chose to marry somebody that she did think she was in love with romantically. Anyways, but she's very, very ashamed, and as you can see in this picture, decides she's going to go into a year of mourning. Now, obviously you have to go into a year of mourning at this point in time. There are a lot of mandatory things. You have to wear black for a year, and a black veil, and after that year is up, you still have a second year during which there are only certain limited colors you can wear. Lilacs and grays and whites, and it's pastel-y, and, to indicate that you are still in mourning. But she kind of goes whole hog on this because she feels so ashamed. And I just kind of like this illustration of the Duchess of Omnium visiting her. But anyways, by the end of the book, she has implicitly agreed to marry Arthur, not explicitly, and the Duke of Omnium has retired from politics and seems to be happy about it, which has been weird. He's been having a lot of emotional troubles throughout this whole book. It was a thing. Anyways, I'm at the end of my time, so that's all I have to say, and I will see you all next week.